I want to talk to you about the reading heuristic and about what it means to read critically. First of all, that word heuristic. What does it mean? Well, a heuristic is a step-by-step process by which we learn something. First we do this, and then we do that, and finally we do something else so that we get to the end of where we're going, and we use that to get there. So in terms of the reading heuristic, we have 3 steps that I've determined. The first step is to pre-read, and the second step is then to go ahead and do your reading, and then finally we reread. So those are really the 3 steps of the reading heuristic. Now, most of us, when we read something, we just start at the beginning and go all the way to the end, and then we're done. And then we wonder why we don't remember anything and why we have to go back and study stuff and so forth. But if we did it right, we would be able to retain a whole lot more from what we read, so that when we take our tests and our exams and have our discussions, that we can call upon what we learn through our reading. Well, let's look at the first step, pre-reading. Now, there are a number of things that we can do during pre-reading. I've given you a whole list on the handout that you should be looking at as you watch this video. We certainly need to know who the author and the title is. We want to know whether or not the author is respected and is an authority about what we're reading. When we are pre-reading, we also want to read the first paragraph and the last paragraph and the first sentence of each paragraph in between. This will help us to get to know what we're going to be reading about. We should get a good sense of it. We may even know what the main idea is after we have done this. Also, during pre-reading, we want to determine when the article was written, because if it's really old, and maybe the information will be out of date. We want to consider the audience for which the article was written. Are we the audience? Was it written for someone else? Maybe it wouldn't be particularly relevant to our situation, in which case maybe we shouldn't be reading it if that's the case. Before we begin reading, we want to know how long it is. Do we have time to go all the way from beginning to end, or are we going to need to break it up into pieces over 2 or 3 days as we read it? If we have any kind of study guide questions that will help us with our reading, we should probably preview those. That way, as we our reading, will get a sense of what we need to remember. We also want to look at the organization of the reading, how it's paragraphed. Is it divided into sections? Are there subtitles? All of these things, looking at all of these things, will help us retain what we read, will help us understand what we read as we go through it, as we begin our reading. So once we've done all of these things, which we call pre-reading, we are ready to read. Reading is the second step in the reading heuristic. Now, I strongly suggest you do the following when you read. Read the whole thing. After you've done your pre-reading, read the whole text, article, section, beginning to end, as quickly as you can. And then go ahead and read it a second time. But in the second time, you're actually going to read what we call read critically. And this is a very careful reading of the article or essay or section of a book or textbook. And when we read critically, we can do a number of things. We can underline or highlight important points. We can look up important words. We can write ideas and questions in the margins. We can formulate questions and discuss answers. We can develop comprehensive answers to study guide questions so that we understand what we're reading. So we can do all of these things. This is called reading critically. And our textbook really elaborates upon how to do this. Sometimes the textbook calls it reading to respond, which is really to, as you're reading, to write in the margins, make comments, ask questions in the margins. Page 7 gives you a whole list of things that you can do as you are reading and responding to what you're reading. And also part of reading critically is, of course, you want to read to understand. And the best thing to do to demonstrate whether or not you understand what you read is to try to summarize it. And page 13 in your textbook tells you how to write a summary and what to include in a summary, and this is very important. There are quite a few things that you can include. Also, not only reading to understand, we want to be able to read between the lines. We want to be able to infer what the author might be stating that the author really isn't stating explicitly. This is called reading to understand inferences. And then also we want to be able to read to evaluate, to draw conclusions from what we read, and to criticize what we read. And there are a variety of different things that we can do to read to evaluate. And finally, after we have done all of these things, well, you don't have to do all of them. You're going to pick and choose among them those that seem most appropriate to help you understand the text. And once you have gone through this reading phase of the heuristic, then the final step is rereading. And when you reread something, you want to read it as quickly as you can, and you'll find when you get to this point that the essay should have opened up to you, and that you have a very clear understanding of what you were reading and what you need to remember. So use this reading heuristic to help you as you're reading your college textbook material. Now, as we're looking at chapter 1 in our textbook, the final section, which begins on page 2, is about reading images critically. And as images become more important, become a more and more important way of communicating, we need to be able to look at images and actually read them and understand them and understand what they're doing, and interact with these images and not let them fool us. So pay close attention to that section on page 22 of chapter 1. So I hope that this little video has helped point out the important points of the reading heuristic, and also the important points of critical reading that you need to have got from chapter 1. And good luck on your quiz regarding this material.